My research topic is Jewish interactions with Christians in colonial America. I wanted to explore why did the Jews of this time period come to America? What did they do once they got here? Where did they go? How did they go from the segregated, prejudiced communities of Europe and then come to America and successfully integrate into society and interact with their Christian neighbors while still maintaining their Jewish identity? How did that come about? What did their interactions with Christians look like? This topic is significant because not many people know that many Jews were present in colonial America. They think of them coming in a later wave of immigration towards the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, when a lot of Jews were immigrating from Eastern Europe. However, Jews are mentioned in passing in several primary sources of the day, by several Christian primary sources, including Jonathan Edwards and George Washington. The reverence that Christians held for the Jews and the Hebrew scriptures is actually quite astonishing, especially considering the prejudiced European background that many of these Christians were coming from. And the Jewish people actually greatly influenced some of the goings-ons for the First Amendment or other smaller movements for religious freedom in the colonial period. A few resources that I found to be particularly helpful, especially as primary sources, was a letter written by George Washington. I forget who he was writing to, but in the letter he's talking about how in the back of his mind, one of the main reasons he supported the First Amendment was so that, quote, Abraham's seed, unquote, would be able to practice their religion in safety. He considered them, although they weren't Christian, he considered them to be kind of in a religious brotherhood with the Jewish people. I also found a really good source in Jonathan Edwards' Notebook on the Apocalypse. He also revered the Jewish people, and this Notebook on the Apocalypse is kind of like a commentary on the book of Revelation at the beginning, and then later on, as he grows older, he adds notes on things that he thinks are leading to the apocalypse, or to the second coming of Christ. So Jews converting to Christianity, large Jewish immigrations, things like that, he thinks are pointing towards the second coming of Christ. I also found a very interesting genealogy of Muslim and Jewish immigrants to America in the colonial period. This one took a little bit more sifting through. It was very statistics heavy, and sometimes was mixed in with the Christian demographic, which made it very confusing. However, I did find it interesting to actually be able to see the records of Jewish immigration in America. The conclusions that I've drawn from this are that Jews actually played a very large role in colonial America. They made New Amsterdam, which is now New York, what it is today by making it a center of trade. A lot of Jews had to immigrate there because it was ruled by the Dutch, and the Dutch didn't really care what religion you were, as long as you weren't a Quaker or Catholic. So they found a lot of safety there. And so because they were able to practice trade and they had more freedom than they did in Europe, they actually turned New Amsterdam into quite a prosperous city. I also found that Jews, since they had this freedom, they felt more comfortable integrating into society while still being able to maintain their Jewish identity, and that their Christian neighbors actually, for the most part, there were some exceptions, but for the most part, were actually quite fond of the Jewish people. The only avenue I can think of for further research would be to see this carried on through the Civil War period, kind of in a part 2 study, I guess, and just to see how the Jewish people interacted with the different ideas of slavery and the abolition movement and all the things that were going on at that time, because still most of the intense studies that have been done on the Jewish people are not until much later at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. So I hope to see that research done in the future, but for now I will satisfy myself with the colonial period. Thank you so much.